Hello, welcome back to BLENDERUSHI live noding. In this episode, I will will explore the Blender modifier, especially the Boolean modifier. The Boolean modifier is, as you already know, it's pretty simple. Basically, if you have like this master objects and you have another objects that you want to Boolean it, you just simply apply the modifier to this guy and see, apply modifier boolean, and then we specify this guy, this object, which is cube number 1, and then we get something like this, which is at the moment the operation is intersections. Intersections just means if you have two objects you get that part. If it's union, you get a both part union together. If you use the difference is like subtraction, so this minus that, you get like a Pac-Man. So yeah, that's Boolean is really simple. But if we combine it with things like Sverchok or animation nodes, you will start to see it's actually quite powerful. Let's say maybe I should use animation nodes first and then Sverchok, but either way we'll do. So currently, it's doing the Boolean. It's pretty fast. It's pretty. The Boolean in Blender is pretty powerful. It actually works with other modifier as well. So let's say if you are kind of using solidify beforehand, so the stack of the order of modifier, of course, important. If we add a thickness to the box and we use booleans, if we make this boolean guy kind of transparent or wired, we can see that we get that shape really easily. Let me turn on also ambient occlusion, maybe madcap. So this is really powerful, but sometimes you want, okay, maybe you were thinking, but what if I want to duplicate this Boolean guy? Oh, apparently it doesn't work like that. We need to combine these two. Okay, combine it, and it seems to stop working, but we need to re-specify the new object. So this kind of design, this kind of like problem that I want to kind of use Sverchok and see how we can explore this part, because we don't want to always need to go to edit mode or to go back and forth to do this. Animation node or Sverchoks kind of work inside the edit mode sometimes. We can kind of edit the inside of the mesh. So let me show that real quick. So with Sverchok, if I create a box, simple box, and then I will use the viewer bmesh. Viewer bmesh will create object right away. I will merge it, and let's see, matrix in. If I create like just a single object for now, vector in, I should be getting something. There you go, this guy, alpha 1, alpha 0. So I can use that alpha 0, and this alpha 0 is a live object, basically. How that I should call it. It's live object inside the edit mode, basically. So if I move this guy, it will make the Boolean. Okay, that's I think that's really powerful, because you can, of course, make a duplicate of this guy many times and inside Sverchok, and you could easily end up with something that's unusual. So Boolean is really powerful if we doing it like this. So we can, of course, control the scaling. I'm scaling it in the Y, scaling in the X. See, I'm carving that bits there. There is the Boolean modifier has beam mesh and carve options. I think the carve is a little bit more enhanced. And let's see, we use Sverchok and we use the rotation as well. The rotation is slightly a little bit confusing, but basically in Blender, the rotation has a couple of different ways we can approach it. Like there's a rotation Euler, there's rotation quaternion, and there is this rotation with angle with axis. So we just provide the angle, for example, vector z, x, y, or z. If I plug that in and I play around with angle, that's what we get because we are rotating in the z-axis. So even just that alone is already showing the power of Sverchok when dealing with a modifier. You see, that's quite unusual. In some other package, the booleans are not so great. It will tend to crash, especially like Maya. So let's see, how can I can also use random vector for the rotations, just one of them, and then we can randomize the seed. This can easily create an interesting design. There's an architecture in Japan that's really pretty much using this kind of design. So that's one. Let me reduce that bit. It's kind of like a cheese. Let me extend that, and then I make a couple of randomness and randomize the seed. So we get something like that. Let me increase the angle. Maybe randomize the angle of rotation as well. Random value, and then use some mapping. Let's plug this into the so the random should be giving number between 0 and 1. We want between minus 180 and 180 maybe. Plug that in there, plug this in there. So this random, so I made a mistake. That should be integer input, plug into this guy and plug into that guy. You see, that's this is already starting to look like interesting design or building wise. Although sometimes it does fail. It does fail when it gets too complex. It doesn't like this kind of too many objects. That's the only one thing. Let me check. This is a single object. Maybe if I boolean all this together, it will actually work. So let me go back. So 2, fine. 3, 4, 5. If it gets too complex, it stops working. Maybe I need to scale the random. Scale the random in the rotation doesn't seem to be do anything, but I can randomize the position perhaps. So plug that in there and have random positions. There you go. That's kind of something. Let's see if I can isolate this guy. Where's the isolate command? Single. There's a way to isolate this guy. View selected. Local view. Okay, local view is 7. Interesting. So local view just isolate this guy. I was using this pie menu. It's a Q. The hotkey is Q. I can randomize the rotation, scale of rotations. Just doesn't matter here in this case. Randomize the seed for the rotations. And it works quite fine like this. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. In fact, if maybe I get rid of the solidify, we have this kind of look. It's if we arrange it like properly, we might be able to get a kind of random generation. So instead of building from nothing, we have like a volume. We have these objects, and then we kind of cut it with all this crazy boolean that's happening. Okay, that's all. That's one thing we can try. What else? Instead of using box, maybe we can use a rounded box, or use sphere. Sphere in Sverchok. Is it heavy? Let me try 8. Let's plug that in and plug that in. Sphere, and how many? There's a lot of points. Oh, okay. That's maybe that's because of the scaling. Let me zero the scaling. And we have this kind of thing that looks like cheese, pretty much. Maybe for our cutter here, we can kind of hide it. Okay, so let's make it 20. Maybe we could make like a small, really small, really low res sphere. With this guy, we can turn it into. Okay, let's play with the scale first. Random here, plug in there, and then of course we want to map the range. Plug that in. The range maybe between 0.2 and 2.5. Plug into the scale. It's not happy because it requires a vector. 3. Plug in vector. Wait a few seconds. Now we get something. It's fairly interesting. It can be like a cheese if we scatter some points around this mesh. Perhaps if I go to edit mode on this guy and subdivide, I can get a better result. Yeah, it's probably easier for Blender to calculate as well. Something like that. Okay, I plugged in the wrong thing, sorry. Okay, now it's interesting. Quite interesting. I can have more random sphere, 40 of them. And let's see if we use solidify, thickness of 0.2, thickness 0.1, 0.4. Seems to be okay. The sphere is in a bad position basically, so that's kind of result I was expecting. It's not always looking too perfect, but maybe if I increase the resolution of the sphere, you start to get something that looks like cheese. It's a bubble, basically, bubble of the cheese. You can Sverchok doesn't have scatter node, but you can kind of simulate that using particles if you really want. So for the particle, really, I don't want to make things too complex. I just duplicate this cube, and the second cube is going to be the emitter it shouldn't have the boolean. Let's delete the Boolean modifier. So this is just gonna be emitter cube to scatter the points along the surface of this guy, basically the cube. So 1 to 1, just scatter it in the faces, random, even distribution. Yeah, okay. How many of these? 100? Maybe 50 for now. Lifetime, doesn't matter. Let's delete the, we don't need the physics, we don't need the gravity. So this is just like a static particle, and it should live forever. And now let's bring the particle in. This is just to scatter the sphere. So objects, particle. This is particle nodes in Sverchok. It's still an alpha. Be careful working with that. It might not work as you expected. So I'll get the emitter cube. And should be post modifier object, plug that in. It's gonna grab the particle and use this as location of our sphere scale, the location of sphere for Boolean. So hopefully this worked as expected. There you go. Maybe I can randomize particle position. Oh, okay, the cube should be showing. In order for particle to work, we need to maybe hide the emitter. And then look in the only render. So okay, that's I think the sphere being spawned where the particle is. And I can randomize the seed, but it doesn't seem to update Sverchok. Oh, it needs probably to update it in a timeline. Okay, so let's see, 20 of this. That's kind of all the dots being randomly placed on this guy. We can also perhaps use a grid here. Resolution of, oops, 2 or 3. Let's update it. I'm using the timeline. I just now I used the arrow left and right, so this is more like a grid. So there are some dots there that's not carving through. Really interesting. Maybe I need to scale the emitter cube or something. Maybe the min and max need to be adjusted. There you go. That's like a little bit like a toy that you might have when you were little. It's carving through all the dots, carving through the cube. This is I guess really interesting, really powerful. And the way that, because Sverchok is separate to the actual objects, we can simply have another cube right here, and here we can carve through. See another Boolean difference, alpha, carve. Carve is slower, probably slower, but it can do a lot more complex design. I just make another duplicate of that object, and this is actually live, and that object is carving in real time, so that's really powerful. I have not experimented with this much, but you can already see this. You can get like kind of like a deconstructed look very fast, very easily. Just box and random sphere. Now if I'll save this, and if I use animation nodes, the advantage is of course we can animate the objects let me try to think. Okay, let's do it using animation nodes. So I'll delete all this and delete the grease pencil. Start with a cube. Just a bunch of cube. I'm using this madcap, this zebra's madcap looks. So I will turn this into a wireframe. Keep that and that. I can say I'm not gonna use this as the Boolean modifier in the Boolean, but I will join this in animation nodes. I will try to do that. So objects group, objects from group. I will group this guy 1, 2, 3. Control G. Animation nodes can be slow, so I turn off always and turn on this 3. Get this group, and then objects mesh data. I'll try to join this if possible. Mesh join, is it join? I hope there's a way to join this in animation nodes. So get the objects and then mesh data list. Object mesh data. Mesh object output bmesh from mesh data tools, join mesh data list, and we need to output object mesh data list, and the final should be object transform up. No, it should be the object output mesh data vertices bmesh. I might need to use bmesh actually. Bmesh mesh data, create bmesh mesh data. I wish there's a one node that can join this easily. So objects and object mesh data. See, object mesh data only takes a single object. If I plug that in, it wants to get the element. So I need to join all the mesh data so that I can simply plug it into this guy. Nice. Object output. This is gonna be the target object. Mesh data on. Generator mesh data list object. Polygon list, polygon particle list. I have a feeling that maybe I cannot join these guys. Yeah, I cannot join it. Maybe I need to use Sverchok for that. It's pretty annoying. Let's grab it from. This is group. Let's get it from group in Sverchok. It's easier in Sverchok. You just use a MK2. Viewer scheme is MK2. And just plug this guy in. Group and merge. That should actually work. Here. I need to apply the matrix. Vector matrices. Vector. Okay, that's a joint. That's the joint objects. Beta 0. That's the one Sverchok connected. So now, okay, finally we can do this. Sorry about that. Difference and get a beta. Okay, this is actually what I want. All this confusion, we don't want these complexities. I don't like that. It should be simpler. So now basically, if I use animation nodes and randomize the position of those 3 cubes, object transform output, and I will use wiggle. Yeah, that's the thing is with animation nodes. I like to use the things like vector wiggle. It's super simple to do. Use the frame into the evolutions. Now if I play back, we get that kind of effects. Okay, the Sverchok generated objects need to be made into wire. So Sverchok is joining the animation nodes objects in real time, and now it's cutting, it's doing the Boolean in real time as well. Files, save as. This is kind of the effects that I want. Amplitude should be maybe 3 or 2. We can randomize the scaling. Scaling vector wiggle can be interesting. Vector wiggle scaling. So let's use number wiggle. Then frame into evolutions. Number, map to number. Plug this into the scale. Something like that. Okay, so it's carving and cutting through in random fashion. Maybe instead of having the objects in here, we can use instancer. So this is going to be a cutter cube. This is the master of cutter cube. It's cutting the objects. This is the beta objects from Sverchok. Currently it's broken probably. Now use the cutter cube. I will use the object instancer. Grab the cutter objects, make maybe 10 of these, plug into the object list. We're gonna copy from source, and then So we have a bunch of them, that's good, that's what I want. But I need to group them together in animation nodes. Group output. Nope, that's not the group I want. Object group create combine objects from group. Object group by name. Filter. Object group operations, I guess that's the one. I'm gonna put it in the beta, and the objects is our objects. It's link. Okay, cool. That's exactly what I want, and this object should be like a wired. Should be wireframe, but I will maybe just put this guy on the second layer. It's not doing the carving if it's in the second layer. Go back to this guy. Here. So that's the beta objects. Switch to Sverchok. Get selection. Where's the master? Color cube master. I will not render you. Back to animation nodes. Object instancer. Let's reload this. Reset source data. And now it should be working. It's cutting through the Sverchok object. Sverchok object is not updating, which is interesting. Sverchok object. Possibly fire. Let's try just 5 of this instance. So that's the Sverchok object. It's the beta. Where's the Sverchok object? Beta 0. Okay, beta 0. And then animation nodes goes to beta. Sverchok object should get the beta. Maybe I have too many of these objects now. Delete. So let's start again. Cube. This is a master object. I'm gonna zero this out. And then I will use a normal cube and group this together. Control G, group 001. This is group 001. Plug this to the object list, and they should be animating. Sverchok should get group 001. get selection. And I should use Boolean here. Get our beta 0 difference, or yeah, difference is good. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I want. It's the hiding that the visibility of this guy that's a little bit annoying. Oh yeah, I forgot. I can use the visibility control here. Object visibility output, and just for these objects, just hide it. There you go, that's kind of what I want. Difference with beta 1. Back to Sverchok. This guy merged together. Oh, I know, it should be carve, not be mesh. Now it's carving. That's kind of a result I was expecting. Yeah, finally. It's a lot faster without the node editor, somewhat. It's always the case. I have the timeline is running at the moment. Start with 1. So yeah, for most of the time this did pretty good job. There is no hiccup. Sometimes it just totally disappear. Maybe that's when there are too many. It's too complex for Blender to handle. Maybe it's gonna kind of disappear. We can have more of this cube. Actually, just duplicate it a few times. And supposedly animation nodes handle that and update everything. So we have 1, 2, 3 objects. Apparently Sverchok needs to be updated again. Interesting. I didn't know that. Doesn't update automatically. So now, finally, we have this cool random wiggling cube cutting the master cube. Oh, just now it has issues displaying it. Too complex for Blender. Maybe it's too complex for the Boolean. Of course, in reality, you don't want to do this too much. You want to join all those mesh first, kind of nicely, kind of Boolean all the cutters into a single objects, and then use that as a Boolean for these objects. It's always a interesting case. This is kind of like because Boolean is kind of like a dirty job. It's not always a good idea to do this, but when it works, it's really powerful. So I just make it like I solidify that, so it's probably easier now for Blender to handle. Sometimes it does die off. Maybe it's too complex with the cubes. But at some point, if you kind of like a certain pattern. Okay, that's cool. I want that. I just duplicate this guy and then apply, and then you have this baked object. And if you want to further cut it, this one's a bit off. It's a bit weird. Don't like it too much. Keep generating something that's slightly better. Duplicate it, apply. So we can have this kind of structure. Random structure generating kind of objects. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much what I want to show you in this episode. Remember that this Blender modifier, even though they are like stacked, they are non-linear, they are powerful, and whenever you can kind of intercept this modifier, kind of hack the modifier using Sverchok or animation nodes, do it. You know, it's really powerful. That's just only with Boolean. I haven't even looked at the weighting, maybe masking, those sort of thing. Yeah, so carve away with this. Just experiment and see what you can come out with. Thanks again for tuning in to BlenderUshi channel. If you have comments down below, just feedbacks, whatever, just say it. I'll have a look. Thanks again. I'll